I mean, here's the true thing about all of us. We all screw up, right? We all make mistakes. I think life is about growing. It's about learning, and it's about risk. Sometimes the risks are good. Sometimes they're not. And I also think it's about second chances.
That's crisis manager Judy Smith. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And make sure to follow me on LinkedIn, where I dive deeper into the evidence-backed strategies that are mentioned in that week's episode. If you're already following me there, follow me on Instagram for behind-the-scenes look at how we make every day better. You can find me at Leah_Smart. That's Leah_Smart. We'll also include a link in the show notes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. As regular listeners of the show will know, I've recently gone through one of the biggest changes a person can experience in life, becoming a parent. I am obviously so excited to share that I'm a brand new mom of a beautiful baby girl. And while I'm adjusting to my new life as a mom, I'll be taking a little bit of time away from the show so I can be fully present for her and my family. Don't worry, you'll still hear me in conversation with a fascinating guest each week, just like you always have. But you'll also be hearing from my producers, Grace and Emily, on a more regular basis. They'll be stepping in to set a little bit of context for each of my conversations. So with that, let's start the show.
Grace, did you ever watch the TV show Scandal?
Yeah, I watched Scandal.
Okay, so I didn't, but it was iconic, so I know a lot about it. Imagine our listener was living under a rock in 2012 and has never heard of Scandal. What do you want them to know about the show?
Okay, it's such a fun TV show created by Shonda Rhimes, and it starred Kerry Washington as Olivia Pope, Washington, D.C.'s top crisis manager. And every week there's some new scandal. So let's say a politician gets caught having an affair. He might come to Olivia Pope's office. He'd show up like in the middle of the night, drenched with rain. It's very dramatic. He's like shuffled in through a side entrance. Olivia's there, dressed in all white, drinking a glass of wine. I loved watching it because you're like, this person screwed up so badly, like there's no way that they're going to be able to come back from it, and she always finds a way. She called herself a fixer, but she didn't just fix PR problems. She tried to change her clients for the better. And she tried to fight for justice. So I still remember, like in one of the very early episodes from the first season, there is a vet who comes in because he is accused of having murdered his girlfriend. And you think for sure he did it because it's always the boyfriend, right? It turns out that he didn't and that he has a solid alibi. But telling people what that alibi was would involve him coming out. He's gay. And so Olivia talks him through coming out, basically, and gives this whole big speech about how he's fought for this country and his country will love him. And it's very 2012. But, you know, you get like the enjoyment of how she spins the case, but also it's bigger than just an individual case. Olivia cares about making the world a better place. The other major storyline in the show is that Olivia is having an affair with the president of the United States.
Very scandalous. Okay, so you might be wondering, why are these two recapping a show from the 2010s? And that's because today we have the real Olivia Pope with us, the iconic crisis manager, Judy Smith. Dubbed America's best-known corporate fixer, Judy's career was the inspiration behind Scandal, of which she was also a co-executive producer. Judy's career took off in the early 1990s when she became a special assistant and deputy press secretary to President George H.W. Bush. In her time at the White House, Judy made an impact. She was the first Black woman to deliver a White House press briefing. And in 1992, she convinced President Bush to visit LA after the city's racial uprising, despite fears that doing so would alienate law enforcement. After leaving the White House, Judy founded her own crisis management firm, Smith and Company, where she's gone on to advise so many notable clients in some of the most intense moments of their careers. She guided Angelina Jolie through her very public divorce from Brad Pitt. She held hands with Monica Lewinsky, pushing through a wild crowd of screaming reporters when the news broke of her affair with President Bill Clinton. And she's counseled countless other celebrities, like NFL quarterback Michael Vick and A$AP Rocky, through their own public scandals. And today, she's here to share how she does it. Judy talks through the most important principles that guide her through these crises and gives advice on how to get through a disaster without losing your values. Here's Judy.
I heard there was a funny moment between you and former President Bush about the affair that she has with Fitz. What happened there?
A mess, as my mom would say, a total mess. I was deputy press secretary, right? And there's a press secretary above me, but for whatever reason, we just connected. He was always such a jokester all the time. And so when the show came on, I said, oh God, let me call him like right away before it came on and just to give him a heads up. And so I called him up and talked to his chief of staff. And I said, hey, I need to talk to him about this. He said, yeah, he's kind of hearing a little bit of it. He knows a little bit about it. I said, well, no, just tell him to call me. Me. So I was on this big conference call. And I couldn't get off, but I saw it was, a main number. And I said, oh, God, it's probably him calling. So let me check the message when I got off. So I checked the message. And in typical presidential style, he left a message and said, love you, want you. And by the way, this is the president of the free world. Call me.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. So,
and you played it on speaker in front of everyone.
Right, exactly. I called him up. I said, I am erasing this right now. I said, stop joking on that. And I said, and if you don't listen to what I'm saying, which you will understand this, I said, I'm going to call your boss. He said, you wouldn't. I said, I'm going to call Barbara the second we hang up the phone. So you just keep yourself straight right now. But he was extremely gracious and, very proud. He must have given 5 parties for me in different states. You know what I mean? So just very, very gracious and very proud. So.
Okay, so talk to me about, I want to start with your work, but I actually want to start with just more of you. Like, what is the intention behind the work that you're doing?
Well, for me, the intention has always been assisting and helping people and helping organizations, as corny as that sounds, right? But I give you an example. So let's say I'm working for X company and they have a issue in culture and women in particular. And women are complaining there's not enough training, right? There's not enough jobs, no upward mobility, basically. And so what I love is I get to come in and say, okay, these are some of the steps I think you should take, and these are some of the things that I think you should do. And so that for me is super fulfilling because I've helped make a difference and helped make hundreds of women's lives a lot better based on the kind of change that the corporation is going to take.
So it's funny because you said, when I asked you your intention, you said, assisting. And yet I think people that have watched Scandal and know the show and so then feel like they know your career think, oh, she's a fixer. What's the difference? Like, what do you do as a fixer?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where all that, the fixer, I don't even know where that even came from, basically, how that started. But I mean, yes, we do try to solve issues and try to solve problems. So I guess in some way that's where the fixer came in. You fix problems. But, the real thing is too that everything honestly is not fixable. It's just not. I mean, that's a hard thing for people to get their arms around. Now, I think most things can be addressed, right? But you can't turn the tide back sometimes.
Well, I mean, I know that you turn down potential clients probably, I'd imagine, a lot. How do you decide? Like, how? I mean, is it that you're going, this isn't fixable, or what's your barometer for going, yeah, I'll take them on or I won't?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that my CO is not looking at this or won't see it about turning down clients. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
fair.
she would not be. I'm just. Let's let me know when this airs, right?
That's
so
fair.
we can, right.
We'll get you an email.
Right.
Trust.
Thank you. But look, there are definitely clients that I have turned down over the years, but the kinds of things that I say what I would consider is legal risk. That's one thing that's important. I think reputational risk and the potential for brand damage. I think all those are important. And I think the other thing that is super important really is like if I can move the needle. Do you know what I mean? If you can really go in and say, okay, this is the problem. This is what you need to do. And this is what needs to get done. I think one of the best ways that you can really protect your brand and reputation, I think, is being really honest with yourself about what your values are and be very clear about that, right? So if someone comes to me as they did and says, Judy, we're going to pay you $100 million if you develop a campaign that's targeted at minorities across the board to get them hooked on cigarettes. And we're giving you $100 million, right? I'm very clear about that. It could be 10 million. It could be 100 million. My answer is still no.
Mm-hmm.
So, that really helps guide me a lot.
So you have a set in your mind of like, what are my values? And do they clash with what this person's asking me to do as a fixer or as someone who's assisting them?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And is it like a checklist? Like, what are some of the values that or is it a gut thing for you? How do you know?
It's a gut thing. It's a gut thing. But, I'm big on really trusting your instincts. It really, when you think about it, is one of the strongest things we have. Yes, I mean, we look at facts, right? But you can't replace the gut and instinct, basically. Yeah.
So then when you think about some of the, you've worked with a lot of high profile people, celebrities like, I'm sure everyone's asked you about, Monica Lewinsky or Michael Vick or these people. What does success look like for you? Are you finding yourself going, I have to get them to a point that they're back in the, in society or the popular culture's good graces? Is that your ultimate goal?
Well, it depends on what their goal is too, right?
Sure.
And what their agenda is. So, I mean, for Vic, obviously, it was all of those things that you mentioned, mm-hmm. right? And I marvel at this to this day. I mean, he just did an amazing job in coming back, but it takes time though. I think people have to be patient with that. It takes time.
It takes time. Yeah.
Right. If you are in a situation where a company's culture is not as good as it should be, right? That is not something that you're going to fix overnight with the magic bullet. That takes time, that takes a plan, that takes a strategy, but it takes action. And it takes being able to demonstrate to your employees that you are serious about the kinds of, cultural changes that you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a time thing. It's a time thing.
So what makes a case tough for you? Like when you deal with someone, you're like, ooh, this is going to be a hard one. What is that does that to you?
I think what makes a case tough sometimes, it could be the facts, but it could also be the timing and it could be the environment, right? Like I look at, cause I've been doing this a long time, and you look at the cultural influences on each era, right? And you have to understand that. Like if you don't understand the landscape, this is one of the big things that I harp on, mm-hmm. then you're not going to be able to do anything, right? And so that is really important. I also think a lot of times, right, when people are making public statements and they take certain action, this drives me insane, before actually having a good sense of the facts, right? And what you're trying to accomplish, instead of just pausing and saying, let me get a little more information. That puts you in an additional bad situation you would have to dig yourself out of, right? If you are talking about X and this is a fact and you're saying that with absolute certainty, and it's really not a true fact.
The first one you mentioned is really interesting to me because, you've also said you have an unwavering belief in the power of redemption. Where do you think your feelings about redemption come from?
Because I believe in second chances. I mean, here's the true thing about all of us. We all screw up, right? We all make mistakes. I think life is about growing. It's about learning, and it's about risk. Sometimes the risks are good. Sometimes they're not. And I also think it's about second chances. And I think that's important.
And we were talking about, we're talking about kind of people or businesses being in the wake of some sort of a crisis. And one of the things that was surprising is that you say that being honest and telling the truth is so important, which you assume that, like, it sounds obvious, right?
Shocker.
But then I know,
right?
Somehow it doesn't happen often.
Yes.
It's surprising to me, though, that, so many people tend to not do it or tend to try to veer in a different direction than just being honest and telling the truth. What do you make of that? And what's your advice around honesty?
Here's the thing that I always say. The truth is important, for sure, right? But another reason why people should think about telling the truth, because it's going to come out. It's just a question of when. Right? You can either take your poison now or take it later. I think our first instinct sometimes is to not come forward and say the truth, thinking that it will get better. People won't find out. It's too hard to come out and say this now. All of those things. But it always comes out in the wash, as people used to say. It's just a question of when. So my advice has always been, you can take it now or take it later, but it's still coming your way. It's coming your way.
My friend's mom used to always say that the truth comes out in the wash. And I was like, God, it does.
Yes.
You always learn.
That is so true. Right.
Yep. Can't hide for long.
No, you cannot. No. You cannot. And think about too, like what to live like that. I mean, really. Right. And always sort of looking over your shoulder or being, afraid that this is going to come out and what impact it's going to have on you and your family and your career. That's a big burden to haul around with you every day.
Is that the mistake you think most people make, or people make most often when there's a personal crisis and they are, visible people, or companies make that mistake?
I think it's more people that makes that mistake in terms of the truth. I think that companies, because there's so much structure, come out and say the facts, but sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes you have to wait for a situation to occur to shed light on it, right? But some CEOs use that as a good thing. I'm thinking about the CEO of General Motors, where they had issues and she was told by so many people, just go out, apologize that one time. Don't say anything else about the bad cars, basically, and we'll put it behind us. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. And the reason why she said it is she said, I want it to be as a reminder to us about our responsibility we have to our consumers and people that are buying General Motor cars, right? And to a lot of folks' surprise, that was very successful strategy for her.
Right, because everyone's going, well, what do you mean? No, you say as little as possible, you move on.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
You don't call attention.
This is what we do. Yeah, say it quickly, get it behind, move on, try to put something else out there. She said, no, I'm not doing that.
Wow. Which is how crazy, right, that deserves a wow.
I know. Right, exactly. Yes, it's almost like our expectations are lower, right? I know. It's a thing.
Coming up, Judy explains what convinced her to turn her story into a groundbreaking TV show.
And since we can't all have our own Olivia Pope or Judy Smith with us during our biggest mistakes, Judy gives us her advice for navigating our toughest moments. Stay with us. And we're back with crisis manager Judy Smith.
I'm curious what it's been like for you. I talked to so many different people on this show. Some of the most, meaningful conversations I get to have selfishly are with other Black women who are doing work in areas that we haven't necessarily been seen in.
Yeah.
What has that been like for you? Especially in the world where I think in your world, you're working with a lot of high-powered, or historically a lot of high-powered white men.
Yeah, I would say it's probably been what you think it has been. It's been hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been hard. It's been tough, but you have to keep moving. You have to, right? I owe that to women that have come before me and women that are coming right after me. And that's important. The thing that I would say that I'm very clear though, as you deal with all of those issues of not compromising on my values and calling people out when it's necessary and when it's important. We were going after business and I found out that this company was paying consultants like us, say it's $70,000 a month or something, right? And so it's great. We did our research. We were ready. And we talked to the company and they said, yes, no, great. We want to hire you, et cetera, et cetera. But, we were thinking of like 25 grand a month or something. Now,
What do you mean?
I know what they pay, right?
Right.
I know what
research.
they pay. Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. So it just took me a moment to collect myself. I said, well, let us think about it. We'll come back to you, et cetera. Great meeting. And I remember calling my CFO, who I adore. And I said, I don't really care what you say. I am not taking a dime of that money. I am not going to do it. Not going to do it. And I called the company back and the person who referred me. And I said, look, would love to work with you guys, et cetera, et cetera. We just place more value on ourselves than what is being placed. And we actually know for a fact that your company is paying X company double or triple of what you offered me. No, don't need the job. They called me back in probably less than 15 minutes after talking to the CEO. Oh, there must have been some confusion. Yes. But we're happy to pay you that, 70 grand a month, right? Or whatever that was. Yes.
You kept your cool.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Always professional, right? But you do have to stand your ground. You do. And I think that's important because I think if you don't, I think you will regret it. The other thing that I always keep in mind, I just learned this at a very early age. I think about the people that are coming behind me, right? And so that's important. The show is by way of an example. I'm not, and anybody who knows me will tell you this, I'm not a, ooh, let's get out there kind of person. It's just not me, right? And the thing on the show that was so compelling was so many people thought that it could not be successful if a Black woman was playing the lead. It would be the first time where a Black woman would play a lead in television in 30 years. And the person who had that lead, she played the nurse, right? I gave myself a long walk it was about 4 or 5 miles. And I'm like, okay, yes, you have no choice. You have to do this, right? There's no way.
I love that you stood your ground on this piece about having a Black woman play the main character because it's so funny to look back now, right? But at the time, the fact that people thought that would keep the show from being successful is unfortunate in some ways because I'm sure based on like their own data or what they thought, maybe there is some truth to it. But Scandal is a household name, like,
oh, yeah.
And it changes so much of how people view Black women, which is so important because to your point, the last role that someone played as a lead was a nurse. Most of the time, I mean, for me growing up, there weren't a whole lot of role models of Black women who were considered to be attractive, smart, all of these things that Kerry Washington so like beautifully embodied in you and attractive to the outside world. I mean,
Yes.
And I know that's not always the most important thing, but it changes the way people look at the world.
Oh, 100%. That is evident, honestly, in so many people that I have talked to, like across the country, across the world. I was in Africa. The show is still running in Africa in different parts of it.
Yeah.
But it's important. I mean, when that is knocking at your door, there's just no way you could say no to that. I tell you what was interesting. After the show was a hit, I got a call from one of the entertainment executives who I talked to, who said, couldn't take the risk because he didn't think the show would be successful. And to his credit, Judy, I was wrong. I was dead wrong. And he said, I'm even looking like a fool now because everybody who didn't take the show is scurrying around, right, trying to do something that competes with it or, trying to program against it. I'm getting calls from, my CEO. Okay, we need this. We need one of these. Where is it? Where is it? Right. And when you look at the entertainment industry now, just across the board and where things are, in particular for, women of color, completely different than it was before the show.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, How to Get Away with Murder. I think about all that Mindy Kaling has done. I mean, there's so many different people that you go, oh, wow, this all feels like it popped up and became normal. And that's what matters, I think, for us is to have like, oh, it's okay. Not only okay, it's desired and it's normal. And
that's
so
right.
like you're allowing people to basically dramatize your life and put it on television, created a movement that we now no longer, I don't think, even have to call a movement because it's part of our lives.
No, that's right. And what's so interesting, in particular in, talking to young people, the consistent thing I hear is that it showed them what is possible. Whatever that big thing that they have is, that things are possible. That's a big thing. It's a good thing.
So I have a question for you, knowing that, a lot of us may not end up being the people in these situations. We're not all famous. We don't have paparazzi chasing us around. And yet we make mistakes. We mess things up. And I thought about talking to you, I was like, gosh, I think the most valuable thing for our listeners, aside from hearing your story, is also like, how do we get some of the Judy Smith, mindset? Like, how do we sort of become our own PR people or fixers when we make big mistakes?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like at work, in our relationships, like, I'm curious to get your advice on a couple situations that tend to come up. And so as I was thinking of this, it was making me laugh because I think all of us can think of either someone we know or ourselves who've done this. But like when you send an inappropriate email accidentally to like coworker or boss, like what's your advice there?
I would say I would fess up to it. Right? I mean, apologize immediately. I'm hoping an inappropriate email was not intentional.
Correct.
Right? But I think one of the things that I have always practiced is you want to own your mistakes, right? If you screw up, just own up to it. I think that when you avoid things, that's when things get overly complicated, basically. So I would just say, which is probably, I'm sure I've done it, I was moving way too fast, right? Trying to knock off 10 things, wasn't paying attention. And that email, as you could tell if you read it, was inappropriate and wasn't intended for you. So please accept my sincere apology. It won't happen again.
What about when you're in a situation where something from your past is brought up that you did not want revealed?
Well, if something from your past is brought up, that actually means that right there, people know about it, right? If people are talking about it. I think to the extent that you can, I would put it into context, right? Depending on what it is, because I think context is important, right? If it's something from your past that you're not proud of or you're not comfortable with or people wouldn't understand it, right? I think putting it into context is important because that's the only way that's going to give people a chance to understand the why and, how it maybe impacted you or affected you.
That kind of reminds me of the landscape conversation, maybe a smaller scale. Like, here's what was going on around me. Here's what was happening.
Yeah.
And this is how this ended up happening in this specific landscape, which maybe I wouldn't ever do again. But then there was something that contributed to that in some way.
Yeah. Like, for example, I remember this was a while back, somebody was interviewing, right, for a job. And, what like most companies do, you do, background checks. And, one of the candidates had a DWI. So the question as we were talking is whether one brings it up or see if they bring it up, right? And so in conversation, I think the last question was, anything I should know about you? And the person said it. And so for me, that and explained it, yes, the person was qualified and good, but that was the thing for me that put me over. Because I knew the information, but they actually told me and volunteered it. And that made a difference for me.
Yeah. And what about for someone who was fired or laid off? It's like that impacts the way people think about us potentially in our social circle, but also in our next jobs.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think the person that's being fired, say if that's us or whomever, I think you want to understand the reasons why, because I know that's hard, but I think it's important for people to understand the why. I also think it's critical for people to take time for reflection and to think about, okay, like what lessons can be learned here. And also, I would say you want to take some time and some space and figure out what you could have done differently. But I wouldn't want to away from, do you know what I mean? If you get fired or lay off, because here's the thing. I think if you act like the firing didn't exist, there's not going to be any growth coming from it, basically. It's important to take some time to figure the why.
And just as, for people who are listening and maybe would like love the chance to get to talk to you or be mentored by you or work with you, what advice do you have given, your career so far and what you've seen as far as how people show up in the world?
Yeah. I would say the first thing that's most important for me and how I try to show up is I think you should be who you say you are, right? That's when things are not great, when things are bad. I think that is important. And I think the other thing that is important is having some sense of your surroundings and know that where you are, you did not get here by yourself, right? And so for me, it is always important in anything that I try to do is to make sure that it has, even if it's a small thing, one person is listening to this. I'm sure it's one, more than one, but
we hope so.
to pass it on, to have some impact and to be able to help another person, that to me there's no better thing than that.
Yeah, I would agree. Judy, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me.
Okay.
The first one is better humans are.
Oh, better humans are those who live with dignity and grace.
Better work is.
Better work is things that you love and things that you are passionate about and things that challenge you.
And a better world has.
A better world has so many people that can jump in, assist, and help and actually make that happen. Let's not wait for somebody else to do it. We can all do it every single day.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this time and the conversation. You are wonderful. And thank you for being a trailblazer. Thank you for taking the responsibility of, giving people the sense of what's possible. I think that's what's most powerful, in your career and also with the show. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That was Judy Smith, a crisis manager, lawyer, author, and television producer. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is hosted by Leah Smart and produced by me, Emily Reeves.
And me, Grace Rubin.
Asaf Kadron is our sound engineer. Tim Bolin mixes our show. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. And Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. Thanks for coming with us, and we'll see you next week.